Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Today's question was suggested by a viewer. Thanks to Spiteful AZ for this one. Amy plays a Titan of Industry, and she wants to put a 4/4 Rhino into play and then put a shield counter on that token. Is this possible? Okay, so in order to answer this question, we're first going to need to know a couple of pieces of information about the process for putting spells and abilities on the stack and having them resolve. The first fact that we're going to need is this one, which says that the instructions for a resolving spell or ability are performed in the order that they're written down. For modal spells and abilities, that would mean the modes at the top are going to be going first and the modes closer to the bottom are going to be going last. This is already a great start for Amy because this is exactly the order that she was hoping that things would work out in. Because the mode that makes the Rhino happens to be above the mode where the shield counter gets put on, that means that this one is going to happen first. And that's good because it's not really clear how this trick could work at all if those modes were performed in the other order. Because the card is worded this way, Amy has a free pass. Well, not exactly quite yet. You see, this was a necessary condition for this trick to work out, but not a sufficient one. For example, there's all kinds of different choices that players have to make during the process for casting a spell or putting an ability on the stack. And if the choice of which creature is getting a shield counter happens to be one of those, well then Amy's going to be out of luck. So in order to determine whether this is the case or not, we're going to need to take a closer look at that process also. So there happens to be a list that says all of the different choices that you have to make during the process for casting a spell. And the list is exactly the same sort of choices as what you would have to do for the process of what we're doing here, which is putting a triggered ability on the stack. I'll save everybody a little bit of reading and say that no, none of those choices are the choice of which creature gets the shield counter. However, there are a couple that I wanted to highlight. First of all, of course, the choice of which modes Amy is choosing is definitely going to be one of the choices that she has to make as part of the process of putting that ability on the stack. So Amy would have to say that she's creating a Rhino and she's putting a shield counter on something, but she doesn't have to say what the something is quite yet. The other thing that might be important here is the targeting. And of course, you also have to say what you're targeting as part of the process of putting a triggered ability on the stack, but because a spell or ability is only considered to have targets if it actually specifically uses that word, and we don't see the word target anywhere in the mode that puts the shield counter on the creature, well, that means that according to the game rules, this mode is not targeted, and Amy does not have to say anything about what creature she intends to put the counter on. Okay, so now that we've established all of that, we can take a look at exactly what the correct answer and reasoning for this situation is. Amy is able to make a Rhino token, and she doesn't have to say what she's putting the shield counter on until immediately as that counter is about to be put on. In other words, when the effect is applied. Because of this, it is definitely possible for Amy to do this trick exactly the way that she's hoping. Now that we've got this sorted out, let's take a look at a couple of consequences of the card being worded this way. First of all, we can say that Amy doesn't have to say what creature she's putting the counter on until the very last second. That means that if Nick, for example, wanted to play some sort of a removal spell in response, well, it would be kind of awkward to do so. There's no point in time in between when Amy says which creature is getting the shield counter and when the counter actually gets put on for a player to cast spells or activate abilities. This means that if Nick wanted to play a removal spell against a specific one of Amy's creatures, he would have to do it in response to the triggered ability from Titan of Industry. And as we just talked about, that's before Amy has to say which creature that she wants to put the shield counter on. Now, another thing that I wanted to point out as being an important consequence of this is that if Nick does do something like play a removal spell or do any other game action that Amy doesn't like the look of, well, Amy is not locked in to the choice that she initially might have made in her head as she was putting this ability on the stack. That means that up until the very last minute, as in up until the very instant where the shield counter is actually getting put on, Amy can change her mind at any point. And so that means that if Nick destroys the creature that Amy was planning on, or he does something that makes another creature into a more appealing option, well, Amy is free to change her mind as she wants and put the shield counter on whatever thing that she wants to at the time when that ability is physically putting the shield counter on. And that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.